All right, so let's talk about capital investment and the bonding bill, because that is, of course, the principal function of this so-called off session or short session, however you want to phrase it, unsession, I guess. Maybe we'll talk about that too. Should we start with you, Representative Carlson?
Well, I happen to be on the committee, and we're in the process of putting the bill together. There were something like $2.7 billion in requests. The bonding bill will probably be, as far as general obligation bonds, in the neighborhood of about $850 million. There's also some discussion, because our infrastructure is in such dire need of funds, that perhaps some cash might be included in that. But that's all in the process now of being discussed. It'll be the major bill of the session, and for those that are listening, when we talk about the bonding bill or the capital investment bill, we have to keep in mind that's the infrastructure of the state. So when I use a rather big number in terms of what the requests are, that's, for the whole state, and that's everything from bridges to college and university buildings. We have to maintain our infrastructure, and I think we have to make sure we're moving ahead in a way that we don't have any more 35W bridges, for one thing. So it's a national problem when we talk about the needs of infrastructure in the United States, and we have huge needs in Minnesota.
Senator Cohen?
I would echo that. Obviously, what remains to be seen is what the size of the bill might be, and given the constitutional requirement that you need a 60% majority to pass a bonding bill, obviously, whether an individual legislator is in the majority or the minority, everybody ends up having a say in what ultimately happens with that bill. So generally, the bonding bills have passed with some very significant bipartisan support, and would hope and expect that to be the case this year. Lynn mentioned some of the infrastructure needs. I think in the last X number of years, I'll say 10 years, there's been a real emphasis on higher education in the bill. Representative Nornes can speak to that better as the former chair of the higher ed division, and Representative Carlson also chaired higher ed as well. I've served on that division in the past, and as somebody who serves on the Senate Capital Investment Committee, I know higher education has taken on a real prominent role, and that's that clearly should be and ought to be the case, because if we don't maintain the universities and the colleges in the state through that bonding process, you can see the schools that kind of fall into disrepair. You're not going to have that kind of infrastructure support coming from the local governments. They don't have the ability to do that. These are state institutions, and I would argue the most vital of state institutions. So I would expect, separate from some of the basic infrastructure, roads, bridges, that you'll see higher education as the major component of the bill.
Well, I think that's very true as we look at what's coming ahead. Certainly, in a number of committees, we've heard many requests that were laid over for possible inclusion into a bonding bill, and certainly our respective committees have a substantial job ahead of them to pare down those requests to finally arrive at the final bill. I think too, there's not only the state's individual needs, but there are also some very substantial local requests that are being made for some things that are truly needful by different areas of our state. And I say that having brought a bill even for my own area to complete the Lewis and Clark rural water system that that would serve various users in southwest Minnesota. We don't often think about the state of Minnesota having water quantity issues, and yet we do in various areas. And so it is a very unique process, as I'm witnessing just being in my second year here. But I tend to agree that certainly we need to concentrate on our assets in this state and make sure that they get an appropriate amount.
And I would agree all the way around that 850 seems to be the number with a little cash thrown in. Again, higher education is a priority. I think when I was chair and I visited some of the campuses, that's the message that I gave to the administrations, that as far as I could control it, that we would be taking care of those buildings and making sure they didn't leak and that the heating systems worked and some of those basic things. And there's a lot of, I think we were inquiring in one of our committee hearings this session about the backlog. The request is for 100, I think each system is 100 million from the university and from INSCU. That's for HEPR, they call it. And that's just a drop in the bucket. They've got many other projects waiting that are lower priority. And so my comment in committee was to increase the governor's recommendation probably by double. He's at 40. I said at a minimum we should be at 80 to again address those issues. And so I think we have also somewhat of an agreement, bipartisan agreement, that we will pass one this year. Last year the bill failed, the larger bill at least. So I think it will pass. It's sort of like maybe it isn't a good comparison, but I'm thinking it's sort of like Christmas, because you're not sure what's going to be in there until it's rolled out, and you're hoping that you've got your present in there or your project in there. And maybe the committee knows ahead of time, but the members themselves generally don't. So it's excitement to see when that comes out and you go through it.
The catch is
your project.
you can't take the gift back, though.
That's right.
It's not refundable. No,
Not
that's for
refundable is
sure.
exactly
Just
right.
Yeah.
as a little footnote, one of the busiest committees you can serve on in the legislature during the interim is the Capital Investment Committee, because we don't just accept the numbers in St. Paul, for the request. We actually do the site visits. And on the House side, the Capital Investment Committee was on the road 20 days this last summer and fall. And one thing that's a nice part of that committee is that you do learn about Minnesota. I'm a native Minnesotan, and you get into all corners of the state, and I've seen things that you normally wouldn't see as a tourist in other parts of the state, visiting some of the DNR lands and facilities and so on deep in the woods and that kind of thing. It's an interesting committee.
Not to put you on the spot, I mean, with having said that, is there a particular project that, you would not have thought of as coming before the Capital Investment Committee before serving on the committee, or one that's particularly interesting, or something that is unusual, perhaps, that the public might be interested in hearing about? I mean, we know about buildings and other kinds of sort of major projects that tend to get a lot of attention, but those aren't the only things in that.
Well, there's most of it is buildings and/or, like I was saying, things like bridges. One thing this last trip that was rather interesting was we were up in the Mille Lacs area, and there's an island with a number of houses on it. School bus pulled up while we were doing the site visit, looking at that bridge. The bus stops, unloads the children, they walk across the bridge, and then the bus comes across. Then we watched that bridge, and it was just rocking back and forth. And so maybe, I don't know if you'd call that interesting, but it was rather alarming, to tell you the truth. But you quickly learned once that bus went across why they unloaded the kids first. And that just is an example of the vital need for much of the infrastructure. And it was an old wooden bridge, literally, but a good-sized one, and it covered quite a distance.
I could add one project that was just recently completed in my district, and that was a roundabout and a new bridge. Not a very sexy project, really. A lot of people weren't even sure we needed it. But I tell you, that is the most popular bridge in town because it takes care of traffic as it was intended. And the roundabout is kind of fun, although they don't keep going around, but there's a temptation. But the traffic flow and the way that bridge is diverting traffic in our community was very well thought out, I'd say. And that was partly funded, not much, but a little bit was bonding money.
One thing that I've always found very interesting is when we're at the University of Minnesota, for example, and you go through some of the research labs, because you're not only looking at the facility, but you learn about some of the research projects that are going on, and it really lets you know where Minnesota is in terms of being just an outstanding institution with our higher education facilities and the research and education that go on. You learn a lot about what we're doing in the state.